Hi everyone, BritSimon here. I have some information for those of you that are interested in some of the geeky sort of behind the scenes stuff with DV Lottery. You may find this update interesting. Curtis Morrison, let me just show you this. Curtis Morrison posted some information which was about the 2024 program, but it's interesting background information that will be useful for other years too. A couple of updates. Basically, there were some declarations that came about from a lawsuit, I imagine. And Curtis has posted that information and made the documents available. The documents being a couple of declarations from KCC staff. So the first declaration is from Brenda Grew, and gives a little bit of information here on how many cases have been issued and refused and so on. This information we knew already. Nothing particularly sort of interesting about that. We know that data from the SEAC database. There's an interesting bit here that says that 583 case numbers have been granted DV visas, LPR status essentially, from adjustment of status in the USA up until August 18th, 2024. So each year we know that, I always say, between 800 and 1200 cases typically take adjustment of status through the DV program lottery. There's people in America who are living in America, let's say on a H1 visa or B1 visa, L1, whatever it might be, right? And those people have an ability to adjust status while they're in America because they won the DV lottery program, right? And so we don't get access to those numbers until after the year normally. So it's quite interesting to see this number, 583 people have adjusted status by August 18th. Slightly lower number than I would have expected, I have to say, but I suspect that we'll probably see that number go over 100 and back into my normal range by the end of the year, because I know that the US CIS field offices tend to push their work until the last minute. That's a very common thing for them to do. It's stressful for everybody. I wish they wouldn't do it, but I've personally experienced that. When I adjusted status on my own DV lottery case, something 10 years ago, in September of 2014, actually was my case. So 583 up to now. But the other interesting thing is, if we look at the other declaration from William McAnally, who is the new director of KCC, that declaration has a couple of other bits of information in there. One of the things it says is that KCC has sent 1,073 cases to USCIS. So that 583 number is cases issued, and KCC has sent 1,073 cases there. So there's around about 500 cases that have not yet been approved that started their process. Now, that's only cases that KCC knew about. That's where people have followed the instructions to submit the payment to KCC, get the receipt, and that's what causes the information to be sent over to USCIS. It's the payment of the fee, the $330, right? And so so there's about 500 people still in the system. Some of those will be denied, of course. Some of those will not have followed the process correctly. But like I said earlier, I do expect that therefore an increase from the 583 into the more normal range between 800 and 1200 cases per year. That number, the 1,073, is much more aligned with my normal range, right? And so I'd expect that by the end of the year, we'll probably have 800 or 900 cases, possibly 1,000 cases that adjusted status through that method, right? That was one piece of information that I think was interesting. And by the way, people may wonder, do these adjustments of status cases count towards the 55,000 number? Yes, they are supposed to. So 1,000 cases will come off DV 2024 in terms of where we can go to. Having said that, in DV 2023, they blew through that number anyway. So who knows what they're going to do this year. All right. The other interesting thing was some data that KCC gave here about they have scheduled interviews for 33,800 processed cases associated with more than 69,012 applicants. Again, we know that information, but I want you to keep that in mind for a moment. So there's 69,000 people there, right? There were 1,073 that went through the route of going adjustment of status. And then here it says the remaining 24,512 processed fiscal year 24 DV cases associated with 53,000 prospective applicants were unscheduled. And it goes on to say, of the remaining unscheduled cases, 17,934 cases associated with 37,747 applicants could be scheduled for interview if appointments for interview become available, which they won't. I'm not suggesting that we're going to see 17,900 new 2NLs. That's absolutely not going to happen. Please don't get excited about that. But what's interesting to me is this. If we add up the 69,000 that they knew of at that time with the 53,000, and also we add in those 1,000, it gives us a number of about 123,000 people that either processed their DS-260 or started an adjustment of status case. And from that number, the 123,000, I think it's 123,250. That's out of the original 143,000 that were selected and announced as being selected. Plus, there would have been some people who got married, some people who had a baby, some people that died. There's all sorts of things that can go on. But there would have been some changes in that population of 143,000. But the interesting thing to me is that KCC say they've processed all the DS-260s, and that's all of 123,253, which means about 13.8% of the original 143,000 never submitted their DS-260. These are people that I call non-responses. They don't ever respond. They don't fill out the DS-260. Why does that happen? Well, maybe they didn't check their win. Maybe they checked that they had won, but they were just, they know in their heart of hearts they were not able to meet the requirements, or they were just interested to see how the lottery works, so they just entered it. But when they thought about it, they think, okay, I'm not really, I don't want to move to America. I don't want a green card. I'm very happy where I am. Thank you very much. And so even though I won, I'm just going to ignore it. So whatever the reason, 13.8% of those 143,000 people that were originally selected decided not to proceed. Which is why when some of you ask, well, why do they select so many people? Well, they have to allow for that sort of thing to happen. 13.8% of people just didn't even apply. So I often say to people, I've heard lawyers, in fact, Curtis Morrison, funnily enough, has said, well, why don't they just select 70,000 people and be done with it? Well, a couple of things. So if they only selected 70,000 people, 13.8%, or let's say 15% of those people, around about 10,000 people, wouldn't even fill out their DS-260. So then we'd be down to 60,000 people. And as many of you who've watched my channel for some time will know, in order to issue all of the 55,000 visas that are necessary, or that are available rather, it is necessary to schedule around about 70,000 people, because some of the 70,000 people will be denied, some won't show up for their interviews, some will be in 221G and it won't clear in time. Some will have their embassies close on them so that they can't go to interview. There's all sorts of things that can happen. So roughly speaking, they need 70,000 people scheduled to issue the 55,000 visas. and they need some percentage more than the 70,000 to actually get to the point where they can schedule everyone. So 100,000 is kind of my above and below number. In a normal year where there's 55,000 visas available, then they should be selecting about 100,000 people, of which about 15,000 won't even fill out their forms. That would leave 85,000 that fill out their forms, their DS-260, and some of those will be blocked by embassies that won't perform and that sort of thing. And then we'll get down to the scheduling of around about 70,000 people from that number. So that would be a much more reasonable number. When they over-select, when they select something like 130,000 or 120,000 or 140,000, it's too many, right? But 100,000 would be about right. And this declaration kind of explains why I've said that. I've explained this concept before, and perhaps now in the data you can see why I asked for that. All right. The other there was another sort of interesting thing. The other thing that I should show you, by the way, is that the 37,747. All of those people have their DS-260 processed, and they are current, but they're not going to be scheduled, right? They're not going to get their interviews. And this was because they overdid the final visa bulletin. They overblew it, which was very useful for some people in some embassies. There are embassies like Vienna and Nairobi, for example, that went all the way to the end. Suva is another one that went all the way to the end. I think the visa bulletin for Oceania, for example, was 2,700, which the highest possible number that you could be current with a 2,700 number is 2,699. You have to be under the number, right? And case number 2,699 was scheduled by Suva Embassy. Nairobi scheduled a case of 122,515 or something. That was pretty much the highest possible case number you could have. Vienna went all the way to the end. Several embassies did that, but it wasn't consistent. There were many embassies that stopped earlier than that in each of the regions because their capacity held them back. And so the visa bulletin at the end was just overblown. It was too much. It wasn't mathematically possible to schedule all those cases. And in some cases, making Africa and Asia and EU current has actually negatively impacted people with lower case numbers in those regions, particularly in EU and to some extent in Asia. There are people that will have looked at the final performance of their embassy and seen that the embassy that they were allocated at, let's say in EU, that their number was, very close to being scheduled, but didn't get scheduled. But there were several cases from Africa or several cases from Asia in their embassy being scheduled, and that's kind of unfortunate. It wouldn't have happened if the African case number had been cut off at a regular number. Same with Asia. So by overdoing the final visa bulletin, they have actually they've ruined the chances of some of the people in various regions at some embassies. The other thing that we saw quite a lot related to this also is that quite a lot of people have been skipped, meaning they had, let's say, case number 33,500, and at their embassy they can see cases of 35,000 got scheduled, but their case for some reason didn't get scheduled in EU. They've been skipped. That's happened all over the world. There have been cases like that at various embassies all over the world where cases have been skipped, and KCC have just absolutely done nothing to fix that. And so again, that has been made worse because of the high visa bulletin number at the end. But the information that we're seeing there is just proof that KCC understand this is going on. Right, they understand, and they're kind of, they're saying, yeah, there's 37,747 applicants that could have been scheduled for interview or could be scheduled for interview if appointments for interview become available. but they are also sending emails to the embassy saying, we've stopped scheduling interviews. So, they know damn well that they made a lot of people current, that they got those people excited and worked up thinking they were going to get their interview, and then in the end they don't intend to send those to announced people. So like I said, this was a fairly geeky update for you, fairly sort of under the covers kind of update. Interesting data to me, perhaps, and to some of you, but not everybody is going to be interested in this. I understand that. Anyway, if you have any questions or comments about this, feel free to leave a comment on YouTube, or better yet, post a question or comment at BritSimonSays.com, and I'll answer your questions there. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.